Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Usama Muhammad, and inshallah we'll be starting a series about the companions of the Prophet, a weekly series to be specific about specific companions and how they gave up so much for Islam, and inshallah to inspire men and women of all ages to give up a bad habit that they do during the month of Ramadan. And with me today I have my guest speaker, Brother Ahmad Badr. Brother Ahmed, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Usama. Jazakallah khair for having me here, having me on this great show. And inshallah we'll be able to achieve that goal of inspiring the Muslims, especially the Muslim youth of this community and of other communities, to give up a bad habit or something that they want to let go of during this month of Ramadan by going over the sacrifices of these incredible companions, inshallah. As you mentioned, my name is Ahmad Badr. I'm an engineering student at San Jose State University. I've memorized the Quran, alhamdulillah, at the age of 13. And I'm currently in a mass usra with Brother Usama, actually. And we aim to organize these some programs such as these to help empower the Muslim youth of our community.
Jazakallah khair. And our first companion to start with, we are going to be using the book Rijal Hawla Rasul, or Men Around the Prophet. And our first companion is Mus'ab ibn Umair. Tell us a little bit about him, Ahmed.
Well, Mus'ab ibn Umair is a very beautiful companion, subhanAllah, when you read about his biography, when you read about his actions. And let me just start off by saying that he was the first ambassador of Islam to the people of Medina. Yeah, subhanAllah. And he was the epitome of sacrifice, of giving up an incredibly luxurious life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was a very well-renowned person in the people of Mecca, in the people of Quraysh, very notable, very high of status. And we'll see as we go into detail that he actually gave up his status, his wealth, his reputation, and all of that for a higher calling, which is to accept Islam, to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make da'wah to others, to introduce them to this beautiful religion.
MashaAllah. So when you say that he gave up a lot of his wealth, a lot of his family and his nobility status, can you go a little bit into detail about that?
Well, to begin with, he was a youth. Just something to mention at the beginning. He was actually one of the most spoiled youth of Quraysh, correct? And he had a very powerful mom who had notable status in the community, and she gave him everything from clothes to money to perfumes. It's even said that when he walked a street and then he left and people walked after him, they'd know it was Mus'ab ibn Umair just because the streets smelled so good. It was, a fancy perfume. Mus'ab ibn Umair was also of such high status that imagine like nowadays if you were to go sit down with like a group of uncles or with a group of shuyukh, right? As a Muslim youth, you don't really know as much, and so in a sense your word wouldn't be taken as seriously if, for example, another uncle spoke. But back in the day, Mus'ab ibn Umair was of such high status that if he were to sit down, people would listen to him. He was that notable of a person.
Can you tell us a little bit about his early years in Islam?
Of course. So after he accepted Islam, mashallah, Mus'ab ibn Umair was a very wise person. When he heard about Islam and when he talked to the Prophet ﷺ, and when he learned about it, he immediately accepted Islam and saw it as the way of truth. However, though, there were people at that time, it was dangerous to become a Muslim. People were tortured, people were persecuted. And so he was seen once going into Dar ibn al-Arqam, which was the place where the Prophet ﷺ held his groups, his halaqas, to teach the new Muslims. He was seen once going into there, and he was also seen once praying. And this person that saw him in these two events went to his mother, and he told her, he was like, your son has become Muslim. And she was incredibly shocked. And when she called him and she found out that he was actually a Muslim, she actually shackled him in his room. She straight up just tied him up with chains, and she said, you're not going anywhere. And he was stuck there. Eventually he managed to escape, and he went to the first time they went to Al-Habasha with the first group of Muslims. They came back again, and then they went a second time to Al-Habasha, and they came back again. And throughout this time, his mom actually at some point disowned him when, she basically told him, you either come back to the religion of your forefathers, or I am no longer your mother. And he chose to stick to Islam. And this was the first, or one of the greatest and first sacrifices that he made for this religion.
MashaAllah. You mentioned earlier in the segment that he was an ambassador, the first ambassador. Can you talk a little bit how he came to that status?
Of course. So Mus'ab ibn Umair was the first ambassador to Medina. He was sent to Medina to teach the people and to introduce them to Islam. And it's actually very interesting when you read about the reason he was chosen is because he had a very eloquent style of speech, a very, it's a very well-mannered, he's a guy that you want to sit down with, you want to talk to, and you want to listen from, right? And so when he went to Medina, it's actually, there's a story narrated in the book where he was speaking to two eventually, very big companions, one of who was, Mus'ab ibn Umair, right? And these two held high power in Medina, and they controlled a lot of people. And it was known that if they were to become Muslim, all the other people with them would also become Muslim. And so Mus'ab ibn Umair and another companion went to make da'wah to these people, right? And these two companions, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh and the other companion, didn't like that. They didn't like that he was there, preaching and giving da'wah. And so the first one went to him, and he went to him with a spear. Notice this, imagine today you're giving da'wah to someone, and he comes at you with a gun. And he basically tells you, stop making da'wah. I don't want you making da'wah over here, right? And look at the way Mus'ab ibn Umair handles it. He doesn't get scared. He doesn't shout at the guy and tell him, oh, I have freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah. He just sits down and he tells him, listen to me, right? I'm going to tell you what I have to say. Listen to it. If you like it, then khair, inshallah, they'll accept Islam, inshallah. And if not, then I'm not forcing you to become Muslim. Alright, there's no forcing going on here. So just sit down and listen. So the guy sticks his spear into the sand, sits down, and then Mus'ab ibn Umair tells him about the Prophet, about Islam, tells him and recites a couple of ayahs onto him, right? And this man likes what he hears, and he became Muslim. And he goes to Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. And then it's narrated that they saw him coming back with a face which he didn't go on to, meaning basically his expression had changed. At first he was angry when he was going to go talk to Mus'ab, and he came back and he had a different look about him. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh then goes again. He has a spear. Tells him the exact same thing, I don't want you making da'wah here. And then Mus'ab tells him again, sit down, listen to what I have to say. If you like it, accept Islam. If not, I'm not forcing you. He sits down. And again, he recites a couple of ayahs, tells him a couple of verses, and he explains what Islam is all about. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh likes what he has heard, and he goes back to his people and he tells them to become Muslim. And it is said that from that day on, there was no house of the Ansar, of the people in Medina, that did not become Muslim. And this shows you the incredible gift he had towards speaking, towards eloquently describing Islam and giving that description to people.
MashaAllah. Can you tell me a little bit about his death and how he died?
How he died? Okay, so Mus'ab ibn Umair died in Ghazwat Uhud, which was the second battle that the Prophet ﷺ conducted that was against Quraysh. And it's a very emotional story because he was the man that held the flag, the flag of the banner of the Muslims. And while he was riding, his right hand got cut off, which was what he was holding the flag with. So it got cut off. And so he said, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ, because at that time there were rumors going around that the Prophet ﷺ had died, right? And so he says, the Prophet, he recites the ayah that Muhammad is only a prophet, before him had come other prophets. Basically, we stick with Islam whether Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is there or he's not there. He grabs the flag with his left hand. That gets cut off as well. Again, he recites that same verse. And then he grabs the flag with the remaining parts of his limbs. He literally, he kind of leans into it and he holds the flag. Okay? And eventually, he basically istushid, which means he died in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He died in this jihad. And afterwards, the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard about his death, he said, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ. He recited the verse from the believers, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ. From the believers, there are men who were true to what they promised Allah. When they said, I will become a Muslim, I will submit my will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were true to that fact. And that was Mus'ab ibn Umair.
So, just to recap, at the beginning of the story, he was one of the wealthiest men in Quraysh, and his thobe, or he would drag to the ground.
Right.
And then when he passed away, Was it also that when they tried covering him with a cloth, his cloth was not long enough?
Yes.
Was that also true?
Yes, that's very true. So when they came to give him the proper burial, mashallah, he was a big man, but also at the same time, after he had become Muslim, it was noted that he only wore the thickest and the toughest of clothes. Like, it wasn't the luxurious fur and silk clothes. It was very tough clothes. They barely covered his awra. And so when he died, actually, they tried to bury him, and the shaheed, they cover him with the clothes that you have, and you bury him over there in that spot, right? And so when they tried to cover his head, the clothes wouldn't reach up to his feet. And when they covered it from his feet, the clothes wouldn't cover his head. So subhanAllah shows you a great difference in what he started out with and how he ended it.
At this point, we would like to ask our audience if they have any questions. We have a question from our viewers, and they're asking about his family. What about his family? Like, did his mom convert? Does he have any brothers?
Okay.
Or his dad? Anything like that?
Alright, well, the book didn't mention anything about his father. His mother, as far as I know, she disowned him, but it's not mentioned whether she converted or not. And finally, he does have a brother, actually. His name was Abu Aziz. He was captured in the Battle of Badr. Mus'ab ibn Umair fought in the Battle of Badr, and his brother was captured then. It's a very interesting story to show you the extent of his sacrifice for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they captured him, he told the guy that captured him, he was like, make sure you tighten the rope around his hands well, because his mother is a very wealthy woman, and she will pay a lot for him, basically. And his brother was surprised. He was like, how can you do this to me? I'm your brother, you know what I mean? We're blood brothers. And he went on to say, basically, that the brotherhood of Islam surpasses the brotherhood of kin, of blood. And eventually his brother was, his mom paid a bounty for him, and he was released.
Interesting. Jazakallah khair. That concludes our segment for today. Jazakallah khair for tuning in. Don't forget that the theme of this is to go talk about companions and about how much they gave up, and for us, inshallah, to focus this Ramadan on something that we want to give up, and we stick with it throughout the year, throughout our lives, inshallah. And tune in next week in the MCA Youth Lounge. We're going to be talking about Salman al-Farisi. Jazakallah khair.